Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about emotional childhood neglect. Stay tuned. So making this video is another request from one of my subscribers. Thank you so much for requesting this video on this very important topic. Again, if you have a video request that you would like to see in the area of mental health, please make sure you leave a comment below or send me a message. I like to make videos that you guys want to see. Make sure you subscribe to my channel. It really does help support me and support releasing this content every week for you guys. So I appreciate that. I appreciate the support. And give this video a thumbs up because that also helps support me. And today, emotional childhood neglect is our topic. So the first thing that I want to talk about was differentiating between emotional childhood neglect and emotional abuse because they're different. So emotional abuse is when a parent or a caregiver intentionally does things to a child to damage them. This can look like a lot of verbal abuse, like saying things like, you won't amount to anything, or you're a failure, or I wish I never had you. There's also usually a lot of psychological manipulation and blaming behaviors that happen in emotional abuse towards children. And all of this is done to intentionally hurt the child. Now, it can get a little bit confusing because oftentimes when a child is being emotionally abused, they're also being emotionally neglected as well. Caregivers that are emotionally abusive often don't do things in the way of validating or helping their children cope with difficult emotions. However, emotional abuse is almost always intentionally done. Emotional childhood neglect isn't necessarily intentional. The definition of emotional childhood neglect is failing to meet the emotional needs of your child. And kids that are emotionally neglected are not always emotionally abused. However, both can be extremely damaging to the child's development. With childhood emotional neglect, the caregiver often isn't intentionally trying to hurt their child. They usually just don't know how to validate and help a child cope with difficult emotions or know that they even need to do that part. And this is usually done due to the parent or caregiver's own style of attachment. So people that are emotionally neglectful usually have what we call an avoidant attachment style. And this avoidant attachment style usually comes from how they were parented when they were kids as well. They were most likely made to feel that their feelings didn't matter and they weren't properly taught how to cope with emotions. And our attachment style is often something that we do learn from our parents starting at a relatively young age because those are the first serious relationships that we have in our life. And in families where parents listen to their child, they validate their feelings and emotions, they help them cope through hard times, the child usually ends up with a secure attachment style. And in families where parents are more standoffish or they don't validate or they don't listen to their kids, they end up teaching their child an avoidant attachment style. And this cycle can continue and become a pattern because we often learn how to parent by the way that we were parented. Other factors can also include things like personality, the personality of the parents, psychopathology, untreated trauma, depression, mental health issues, even busy schedules. Parents that work a lot and are really, really busy and have hectic schedules might not have time to emotionally attune with their kids as much as they could if their schedules weren't so busy. But a lot of it is that avoidant attachment style that really, really does inhibit a parent to attune to and connect to their child on an emotional level. A lot of times these caregivers, they just kind of come off as kind of aloof and kind of cold. They often don't know how harmful this is. They do provide all of the basic necessities to their children, clothing, food, shelter. Emotional neglect is not the same thing as physical neglect. But really building that bond and attaching emotionally is quite absent. So next I want to go through some signs that you might have suffered from childhood and emotional neglect. And I have 9 signs to go through. Number 1, you're afraid of relying on other people. You often reject help when help is offered to you. You are kind of this independent and I don't want help from anybody. I don't want to have to rely on anyone else, that type of thing. And that's often because you weren't taught to rely on your caregiver when you were a child. So you grew up having to meet your own emotional needs. The second sign, you struggle being able to identify your own strengths and your own weaknesses, even your own likes and dislikes, and even things that are more goal-oriented or future-oriented in nature are hard to identify for you. And that really does come from that lack of validation. When we do something well and it's validated as being good and awesome, then we know that this is something that is a strength for us. If that doesn't happen, then we have a really hard time identifying what our strengths are or what our weaknesses are. A lot of negative self-talk going on in your head, a lot of you pointing out your own shortcomings and flaws. You really struggle with even understanding yourself. Number 4, you are a master at blaming yourself for everything, and you tend to feel a lot of feelings related to shame and to guilt. You might often struggle with self-anger. You feel angry at yourself. If something goes wrong, it's always your fault. And you just don't feel like a good person. You feel like something's wrong with you a lot of the time. Number 5, you have a hard time expressing emotions yourself, and often a lot of the times you're unable to identify how you actually feel. In fact, you might feel just completely and totally numb. Feelings of emptiness are common, being cut off from emotions or not being able to express your emotions. Number 6, you are easily overwhelmed and you tend to give up quickly. You don't have that self-confidence in yourself to be able to do things that might be a little bit harder. Number 7, you have low self-esteem. Self-esteem is that overall evaluation of who we are as people, and it tends to be quite low in victims of emotional childhood neglect. You're extra sensitive to rejection. And that's because a lot of the time you felt rejected in childhood. You came to someone that you felt you could trust with something hard, and they kind of brushed under the rug and they didn't acknowledge and validate that. So you experience rejection from a very, very young age. You grow up being extra sensitive to it as an adult. Number 9, you often just feel damaged or empty. You feel like something is missing. Although that something that's missing is very, very hard to acknowledge and to name. This just can kind of feel like a lot of ambiguous feelings about being you. You don't really know what to make of yourself. And there are a lot of symptoms that can affect people that have been through emotional childhood neglect, starting from childhood and then continuing on as an adult. So I wanted to talk about a few of the things that can happen when this occurs in families. Children that are being emotionally neglected can experience increased risk of depression and anxiety, other mental health disorders. They can experience struggle with anger, and a lot of times that anger is internalized and can come out as anxiety. They can be aggressive, they can have failure to thrive, developmental delays. They might have a really hard time in relationships with their peers and establishing strong friendships. They might struggle with both emotional intimacy and physical intimacy in all of their relationships. In adolescence, they might cope using substances or alcohol. They can appear really emotionally blunted and indifferent. And in adulthood, there's a lot of side effects of emotional childhood neglect too. In fact, if you are watching this video because you think that you might have been emotionally neglected in childhood, you might be experiencing some of these things. Post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety, continuing on as an adult. Emotional unavailability is a really big one. So you tend to struggle to open up to people emotionally or connect with people on an emotional level. So that makes interpersonal relationships with others very hard to do. You don't feel like you can ever really achieve deep friendships and rich relationships with others. Lots of feelings of guilt and shame and anger. Difficulty trusting other people, feeling deeply flawed. Difficulty trusting other people, not able to rely on others to meet any of your needs. The good news is that this cycle can be broken and these issues can be dealt with in therapy. Strongly encourage people that have gone through emotional childhood neglect to make sure that they seek out a therapist that really does understand the effects of it. Family therapy can be really helpful for younger kids that are experiencing this. Things that you can do on your own is to learn how to start recognizing your own feelings and emotions. So actually sitting down with yourself, something that I would recommend maybe journaling about, like, how are you feeling? Practicing identifying emotions and feelings can be very powerful into learning how to fully experience them and to manage them. Another thing you can do is to start asking people for what you need. Believe it or not, there are people out there that do want to help meet all of your needs, including your emotional needs. So if you have a support system, people that you are there for you, and if you need a hug, ask them for a hug. It's a good place to start. If you need a ride to work and you know someone that can take you to work, like a coworker, ask them for a ride. Don't have to call an Uber. Practice asking other people for things that you need. And when people say that they do want to help us and they are there for us, don't push them away. They mean it. If we do push away the people that want to help us, we are going to continue to feel empty inside and feel like something is missing. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Again, subscribe if you haven't yet. It really does help support my channel. I release 2 new mental health videos every single week, and I would love to see you in the next one. Thanks and have a great day.